Okay. So let's start a discussion. My name is Axel Arnö. I am projektledare at Swedish Television for documentaries. We also are proud co-producers of this film, and I'm glad that SFI have invited me and Orwa to do this conversation. I will start, but then you are all welcome to chip in with questions whenever you feel like it. So just raise your hands. So Orwa, thanks for the film. It's quite a tough watch. Let me start by asking you, what is the situation right now? I know you spoke to Basset quite recently. Can you just tell us briefly what's happened to him and to Osama?
Thank you, Axel. It's button. Did you find it?
Take that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you to the team of the staff of SFI. Thank you, Axel. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I did speak to Basset 10 days ago, but today there are like more lively news from the siege. Basically it's very bad. It's much worse than ever, and it's getting only worse. What's happening is that there was an attempt of negotiating an end to the siege, a little dignified end, so that the fighters and the civilians would withdraw, but without too much humiliation or detention. It's been a month now since the beginning of that attempt, and suddenly the regime, after everybody thought there was an outcome to the negotiation, but the outcome was not really what the regime wanted, maybe. So they stopped the negotiation all of a sudden, kept everything suspended, and today, and since dawn, it's one of the heaviest days of shelling over the besieged areas. So it's TNT barrels and like extreme shelling from Air Force, probably to really pressure the negotiation in a different direction. So the situation is very difficult, very bad. Basset is still in this besieged area since he went at the end of the shooting, the last scene you've seen. Life there is really extremely difficult. They did receive some food supplies and medical supplies in early February, when the United Nations brokered a deal that included getting them some things. But of course, as we anticipated at the time, it was kind of a media bomb, a media bubble, because the material that was allowed in was maybe sufficient for a week for the besieged people, but it did not involve any real solution for the situation. So the last video Basset published on April 4 was showing that they are eating green grass. They are collecting green grass and cooking it, and they are he's definitely angry, but still him and others in the siege are very keen on keeping a very cynical and even sarcastic good humor, spirit of humor. So they were just started recently to publish on Facebook like recipes from the siege, for example, showing the world what's the best way to cook green grass, what can you do with a small turtle, things like that.
And Osama, the media man.
Osama is still, we still don't know much about Osama. We have rumors, little bits of news here and there that tell us that he is probably alive somewhere in some secret detention center. But we don't know more than this. We don't know much about where he is or what he's doing. What I would imagine is definitely that should he be alive, he would be, the kind of the pleasure of his inmates in any detention center, because he is so generous. I have to say the man has an amazing spirit. He's very cynical. He doesn't accept, he's like always in opposition to everybody and everywhere, and even if that's contradictory. But still, when somebody needs help, we have tested the man long enough to know that he'll be helping someone now.
The film as it now stands is of course quite violent given the situation, but I know it didn't start out that way. Can you tell us a little bit more by the origins? You started by filming a peaceful protest.
We couldn't even imagine what would happen, and yes, we were committed to producing a film that was about an iconic, like two wonderful young men, really in a peaceful, pacifist struggle for rights, for freedom, and gradually becoming more and more important. So it was more what we imagined with the story of more a story of coming of age during such times and realizing themselves, finding their language, finding their self-expression, but we never anticipated that it will turn into this. So in the beginning, in the first couple of months of shooting, we were only asking ourselves, will we really finish shooting before the revolution ends? We didn't expect it to take that long. We didn't expect it to turn that ugly, if one may say. And yes, so gradually the reality took the film to bear witness. I mean, like to a very different story, something we'd never imagined.
And I mean, talk about the difficult situation for a documentary filmmaker. I mean, you started out as a cinematographer a little bit yourself. How did you shoot these images? And I mean, it must have been very difficult for you to just go there and then get out the pictures from the war front.
Of course, it was a wonderful team. It was many who were involved in getting this footage into the film, and it was on different phases. In the beginning, we tried to get a cinematographer. We interviewed Talal and I, maybe 20, and we never managed to convince anyone to take the risk and go with us to Homs. So I produced films. I was an actor before that. I wrote as a journalist, but I never really worked professionally as a photographer. I was a hobbyist, one is an amateur or something. But we ended up taking that choice because there was no other. So we took the camera kit and went there, and then we developed this frequency that we went for about a week every month for I think 7 months. It was always an odyssey every time, how to go there and how to get back, how to dismantle the camera. The camera turned into 14 pieces and hidden inside the chassis of the car. So you'd find the lens in the radiator, the camera body inside the sofa, the whatever is that the term for the seats, the back seat. So to take the camera pieces out of the car, it was like 2 hours. Really a real mechanical work to get the camera pieces and just to put it together again. We were helped by many people. I mean, like, because we didn't want to go only as a group of men traveling to Homs, so we also asked, even my mother helped, Talal's wife helped. Everybody tried to be there so that we look like a family, less suspicious to the checkpoints. Gradually it became more and more difficult. So when that happened, we started to rely gradually on Kahtan Hassoun, who is a wonderful activist, media activist, who appears in the film a couple of times, Abu Adnan. So Kahtan, what he did was the film's turn into really becoming very close to the skin of its characters. Maybe when I was shooting in the first half of the film, it was more of watching what's happening, or watching the people, looking at the homes, at even the battles. But it was not as when he started shooting. He's just one of them. He's one of, he's always with Basit at the time. So when he started shooting the second half of the film, it was really just in the middle of it from inside and not anybody watching.
Yeah, it's like he's the guy that shoots, says, "That's my cousin. Yes. That's my cousin. That was his cousin." Yes.
How did you know that?
Well, I heard it.
Yeah, it's him.
Actually did some research before. So, anyone in the audience who wants to chip in with a little question? Okay, go ahead.
Hey, my name is Gayat Al-Madhoun. Nice to see you, Orwa, here in Stockholm. The film is great. Thank you. It's really wonderful. I have a small question. when you say that we didn't know that it will become the situation like this, but I think maybe all of us, we know how the situation from the 80s when Hafez al-Assad, the father of Bashar al-Assad, he destroyed Hama. And this happened in 2012, but in Daraa, where my family live, when they began the revolution, 100,000 soldiers, they attacked the city. So we somehow we have some idea that it will be like this, and we know. But in the end, we decided to go with it.
Thank you. It's a straightforward, very important question, Riaz. Should we take
not really a question, maybe, but a statement from Riyad. Yeah. So if you don't want to answer any
I'll say just respond a few words. It was, yes. I personally lived Hama 1982. My family I was, born and lived in Homs, but my family is originally from Hama, and Hama is 50 kilometers away. My father has 16 cousins of my father's were killed in one day in the massacre of Hama. So we know what kind of regime is that, and we did see the army attack Daraa as much as, even though we're from another part of the country, but until late September, October 2011, yes, we were hoping. I was still going to Homs and discussing with the revolutionaries in the city whether we should fight back or not. And the same question was very eminent in Daraa, in the same way in your area, and some real grassroots leaders of the revolt were really trying to keep it pacifist. So we were not sure. We knew we will be murdered, but we did not know we will answer back. That was the point. What position we take, and then we were definitely hoping for a different international reaction. So we were hoping that it would end somehow with a shorter duration and less bloodshed.
Then I'll continue. Oscar.
Thanks. It's a really good film. This is more of a film question, but and maybe it's a bit cold-blooded to ask it, but I ask it anyway. When you end up in a situation like this, where you have a character with this star quality, and then you have this drama, and you're in the middle in it yourself, being Syrian, how did the creative process, how did it evolve when you choose the perspective? Because in the films I see quite many perspectives, and it's good in many ways, but I can see it's a bit, it really makes me want to ask you that question. When you should choose the perspective of the telling of this film, how you should tell it, how did you think, and what were the decisions that you took?
First, I'm not the filmmaker. I'm the producer. I did part of the camera work. So I was there. I was discussing with Talal, the director, all the time, and we were searching for answers together. But of course, it's his question. Anyway, I'll try. It was really a very difficult ongoing research. It was like really excavating for what's the right angle, the right way to tell the film. When Talal started to make the film, it was something very different. He was imagining something from the eyes of Osama, the video activist. He was imagining that Osama would lead the film, be like more or less the image of the director himself in a way, following the character and so on. Osama's story was so different than anything we thought it would be. And then it turned into this thing that we don't know how to end the film. Talal came up with this open end that you saw. He thought of this end a couple of months before Bassett really returned to Homs. And he even thought that he should make it really an open symbolic scene where just Bassett is crossing a street with "Return to Homs" sign, in the street, and we were not sure that Bassett would really return to Homs. So it was in a way a good perceptive or what's the word? Good prediction from Talal to imagine that this should be the end. And it's still in the film now, although it's very real that Basit returned, but it is still a symbolic kind of an closure that we go back and then we see what happens. In terms of, you know, for example, the use of Talal's voice, of the filmmaker's voice-over, that was also a big question. Now, of course, it's always a big discussion between the two sides of this table. You know, how much should we explain, for example? How much context we should inject in the film? Does it have to really give a wider context, a wider explanation? Or as the director would always be fighting for, most directors probably of such kind of film would be fighting for the story. For, you know, this is not about a chronicle of the revolution. This is about the chronicle of these two men and their surrounding. So it's always about finding a middle way, about finding how to balance this. And I think in this sense, that was the kind of discussion always happening. I don't want to move a little more on answering your question because I would be crossing directors' boundaries. Maybe we talk against him outside, you and me, but here it's public.
But then I have another question. It's a political one. And it,
go ahead, Oscar.
yeah, I just wonder, you know, because when we read in the papers, you know, we read about the Al-Nusra Front and ISIS, and you know, it's getting just more and more radical. And this guy, you know, why didn't he turn into a radical? You know, why didn't he become more radical than he became? What do you think about that?
He did, but he did not turn into an Islamist radical, and he did not lose his independence, and he did not decide to fight for something else but his own town. So I became more radical, not Islamist radical, but I became, for example, much more aggressive when I answer questions. Not now, so far I managed well. No, really. But
you're doing fine so far.
We're experiencing this. And in Europe generally, I'll tell you two things. First, Talal used to work in the first year of the revolution. He worked as a reporter, as a video reporter, with alias names, without anybody knowing who he is. And he worked a lot for different, like, premium media outlets, Reuters, CNN, whatever. And then it was something I lived with him, next to him, while he started to make the film. When he was making his video reports from demonstrations, from like trying to go, for example, focus on women in a certain village or town when it's the women preparing for the demonstration and preparing all of the props of it and so on. And then the media outlets started by the end of 2011 to reject all such reporting and to say, we're fed up with that. We want the images of Al-Qaeda and the radicals. So I was really there when Talal was calling them back and saying, but I don't see them. I'm going around the country and I don't see Al-Qaeda or those extremist radicals. You know, and they were telling me, we read about them everywhere. We want their images. And we're really, you know, our audience is bored of watching your pacifist revolution. So I think in that sense, it's kind of the Islamophobia, paranoia, and also the soap opera instinct of the Western mainstream media audience that kind of really helped push towards importing radicalism into the country. I'm not blaming that because there are problems like, you know, starting from Ronald Reagan maybe, that lead us to having Al-Qaeda or its similar groups. But it was really calling on the demons, like really some kind of strange ceremony the world played. Then, now when showing the film in Europe, it's, by the way, very different between Europe, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and the USA, for example. In Western Europe, particularly, I think I even did a small statistic. We showed the film so far, I think, 35 times, so 35 screenings in Western Europe. The film has about 12,000 words in the subtitles. The word Salafist is mentioned once, and in 15 out of 35 screenings, the very first question was, what about the Salafists? So, I mean, you have to start thinking, is it in the film, is it in Homs, or is it in the brain of the person asking? You know, or is it in Western Europe, basically? All of this amazing focus on what's radical. There is radicalism, and it is growing. It is growing mainly because all that is moderate is not being supported, is being left on its own, basically, with, you know, very small exceptions. But generally speaking, the political is left on its own, totally discredited by the West, mainly, by its supporters, by our revolutions, you know, theoretically, our supporters. And support is very scarce, and most of it goes through the regime channels, through United Nations, World Food Programme, UNHCR, ICRC, all of those who have to still respect their deals with the Syrian state. And that's interpreted today as respecting the regime and getting the approval of the regime on distributing and who eats and who doesn't eat. This is where the majority of the Western millions of dollars and euros go. Now, when you leave the moderates like this, the radicals are getting a lot of money and a lot of support from wherever that comes. You know, in the case of Al-Qaeda and really extremely radical groups, it comes from shady, strange network around the world that we don't really understand, and nobody really understands well enough. But for radicals, not radical radicals, only radicals, it comes from Qatar, it comes from different sources in the region. They are well supported by Turkey, for instance, by the government of Erdogan. So when you put all of this together, you will see that moderates are dying of hunger. Basically, they are in real, you know, whether it's the fighters, they are not eating enough and they don't have ammunition. Politicians, they are discredited and always being challenged to keep, you know, why aren't you in control of the armed militias? While actually all of the support to the armed militias is a bypass to the opposition. So there's no chance for the opposition to be really effective. What's left? We do this because film has this different nature, maybe, that without a lot of, you know, big money or big government support, we can bring something to the people of the world that people are maybe curious to see or would like to see, and then suddenly we have a much bigger job or role than we applied for in the beginning. You know, we started as film people, not as, you know, people who have all of this weight walking around the world. I hope I answered, but it's not an easy question, but it's an easy situation in Syria. We go back to the beginning. There's a dictator who's been massacring the country for 40-something years with his father. We need to get rid of him. So if we want to solve all of the symptoms first and then go back to the original problem, I think the world is bluffing, because the problem is obvious, and everybody who says no, it's complicated, we are not sure who we should be supporting. Many bad people, many bad hands. That's where we start hearing bluff, 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 because it's quite obvious.
Orwa, can I ask you the reactions from the viewings all over the world? Have there been also very negative reactions from the opposition, or I mean, in your dreams, this film will change the situation in Syria, and we all, you know that it's not about one film, but it can add. But what has the reactions been when you've showed the film? It's only been out since Sundance, in IDFA actually, in Amsterdam in December.
The reactions so far are very good around the world. I mean, it raises very interesting debates. It's always voted for well. It just received yesterday night an audience award in Italy, in a festival in Italy. So it's okay. People are receiving it even when it triggers their paranoia or their, you know, kind of big questions, fears. It was not yet screened in our region, mainly for safety reasons, for Osama and other people appearing in the film. It will, before the end of the year. We will see how and in what's going to be blurred and what's not, and in what versions and so on. Bassett saw the film, he was so happy with it. he started inviting people. Whenever somebody visited him in the siege, he would just tell them, come watch the film. And we officially held 3 days of screenings in the siege of Homs 2 weeks ago. Yes. Yes, we just sent a downloadable link, and Haj Abu Ayman downloaded it in besieged Homs and put an announcement in the street and on his Facebook page that all inhabitants of besieged Homs are invited to watch the film at any hour for 3 days. So that's our
how many people are inside now?
We know for sure it's 1,600 civilians, but we don't know how many fighters. I would estimate that a little under 1,000. A little under 1,000 fighters and 1,600 civilians, so that's 2,600.
Okay, and I
Good
guess
audience.
Yeah, yes. And I guess for them it was a boost
But
of morale.
it's always very scary there to create big gatherings. So that's why when we invite to a film viewing, for example, it's like maximum 10 persons watching at a time. So that, because everybody's so paranoid about, being in large groups, because everybody would be killed together, so it's better to.
Yeah. Question up there.
Can you talk? I saw The Square also, and now this one's just they remind me similar things that are going on Revolution, and again I feel like, where are the women? They're not in The Square either. And they're really not that much in this movie. So talk a little bit about kind of what the women are doing as part of this revolution, and how things are going to change for women.
I didn't see The Square, and The Square was mainly made by women.
Yeah, it's a female director. Yes.
Sorry?
There's a female director, but the protagonists are all men.
Yeah, I haven't seen the film, so I will not talk about it.
There's a lot of guys in that film too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just talk about your movie then.
This film is a film about men on the front line. So it is a dramaturgical decision to stick to the core story of the film, which is the story of these men on the front line. The women are actually 500 meters behind this. They are very near, but the two worlds don't really mix. When it's a front line and a battlefield, it doesn't really mix. I think that women in armies, in the most sophisticated armies of, the most supposedly sophisticated states, are still new, and it's still a big question, and it's not working everywhere. So this is a war movie in that sense. So there were women in the footage in different time, in different parts of the footage. It didn't happen that any of them turned into a full character in the film, because the filmmaker wanted always to follow these two men and see what's happening, and they went to war, and it became really a disconnection. To me, no one film is responsible for a full coverage. This is a film about a very masculine part of what's happening in the country. Our next film is going to be a very feminist part of what's happening in the country. It's never going to be one film representative, or one film responsible for representing a society or a full narrative of a country or of a history. I think it's a little too asking for too much from a film, and I think it's always there. If you saw his mother in the film, what she said to him, Bassett's mother is an amazing heroine, by the way, and she's really one of the most moving women I met in Homs. And when she said to him, if you only allow me, I would go and cook for you at least, if you don't allow me to fight. She didn't, but she was there and she said it. The thing is, women have played a main role in all that is happening. Main role in every junction of what's happening in the country, including arming, including supporting the decision for arming the revolution, including big decisions even of battles. Now, it's a very terrible international, historical, universal standard so far that I believe personally women pay a lot in every revolution and then pay the price of it at the end. I think it's the injustice that the entire world is still living in. So we should move to the next film. See the women. This film is a film on the front line. And yes, there are no women on the front line.
Another question in the back.
Hi, I'm Susan, and thank you very much for your film. It's really touching, and I understand. What strikes me more is, of course, this cry for freedom, which is kind of hijacking me. And about hijacking, my question comes back to that. As a filmmaker, the producer or the film director, the team, how did you deal with the situation of working in front of an activist? I mean, if I would do it, probably I would start the next day, become an activist myself. How do you work with that? Did that, or were you ever in that situation where you felt like, my God, I cannot just film, I have to do something myself? And as a filmmaker, how do you fight that? I hope I made it clear, I don't know.
I don't fight that. I have always been an activist. Since I remember I opened my eyes, I mean, it's a different reality. It's a difficult country. You know, we were raised in a country where there is dictatorship, where there is daily question of dictatorship and the daily question of position. You know, we witnessed the international rise of human rights as a secret solution, and we started all working for human rights and defending human rights. We just went through all of and I'm talking in a very collective way. It's not me personally only. It's the guys here too. You know, none of us was just submissive. We started a film festival a couple of years before the revolution started, and we were always interrogated because the intelligence of the regime believed that our festival was all about you know, providing a platform for opposition and for critique. We had to find ways to work around that as exhibitors of documentary film, I mean, including when we showed Peyo's film. It was a question. And we would just say, but it's about Gaza, it's about the terrible Israelis, they are the enemy. And they'd say, yeah, but next page, what are you trying to say? No. And it was always difficult. I used to be interviewed by intelligence much more than I used to be interviewed by the press, you know, doing the festival. So getting to this point, the real challenge facing these guys, you know, they are like more or less my younger brothers, or I don't know, a bit would make me in the age of their fathers, and what's embarrassing is one's own cowardice, and not the side of being an activist or not doing something or not, because I believe we were doing as much as we could so far. I don't want to, you know, what's the word, torture myself or the others in the team, but I think we're still working and trying. What was really embarrassing is that you stand next to Bassett or Osama or any of these guys and feel scared of crossing that street, and then think, why do I have to cross it? You know, I mean, I can go back home. I have family. You know, I have people who I want to go see. But then you just look at them and you become so brave just because they are next to you, just because you can't. This is when I first met inspiration as a real life thing and not as a theoretical blah blah blah. You know, like when you feel you are so brave, although you're not really necessarily that brave, but it's just because we're together. Can I really say I'm not going? I had this similar questions when I was an actor. You know, so it's all comes. I think film is is parallel to activism, to any kind of active participation in the world. So, no, yeah, it's a different thing to me.
Yeah.
Okay, pass the mic on to Pio.
No, I mean, what I really liked with this film was that it was some kind of psychological investigation in the male way of being as a soldier. I mean, I could nearly feel the sweat of these guys when they were there, and that's what I like with this film. That I would even like to have more of it. I mean, I could very well get rid of some of his songs and feel more of because the talks that I had when they thought that the camera was not on or things, I really got me a feeling that, my God, this is a world we see very little of. We hear a lot about men, and we speak a lot about men, and we speak also. I look very much forward to your film about the women in Syria. But also, I think sometimes we are scared of going really close, and I think you are close, and I would even, of course, like a film movie, I would even like to be even closer. But this way of this male behavior, and I like very much when he is scared in the end, when he's really afraid of being dead. And did you have moments like this male talking that are there that you never used, or that you thought was too male, or something like that?
No, I totally see your point, and and yes, it is interesting. I mean, whether we see it from a sexuality viewpoint, like you just did, Pio, or I see it from the viewpoint of battle, of being there, close to the skins, as I would call it, of these men in these extreme moments. It ends up in the same place, but different filmmakers would look at it differently. Now, the thing that it was Talal's call, of course, the director's call, and at some point in the middle of the shooting, months after we started, he was convinced that he has to be loyal or faithful to one thing, which is the reality that this is a hero. A hero by the kind of epic or the kind of stories kind of hero, not a normal man in the sense. And frankly, we all fell under the influence of Bassett. I mean, I can tell you that it was like it's amazing. I mean, he's an amazing man, I have to say. And then do I criticize him for things? Maybe yes. But on the other hand, when you just sit with this 19-year-older and feel like he is maybe older than me, like this is the kind of feeling, and see that he's so persistent, so consistent, and so smart all the time, until during Geneva 2, for example, he had a very clear message from in the siege to Geneva 2, to the negotiators, which was very impactful, by the way, from him when he became 22 years old. He made a video telling them, no bullshit, small, soundbite solutions. If you send us food, I will personally shoot the food. You're not allowed to negotiate on feeding us a couple of boxes. We need humanitarian corridors. We need our wounded to be able of decent, medical help. And if we need food or medical supplies, we need them to be regulated, and we don't accept just simply sending us a patch of medical supplies and food. So what was a surprise to me, talking about radicalization, what was a surprise to me is that, to me, this says that he as for what he stands for, does accept the concept of negotiation. And that was a great thing for me to know. So even then, I look at this young man and say, how come you're not crazy yet? So in that sense, it becomes a story.
Amazing. Yes. I'm also amazed that they actually have some means of getting their message out from the siege. They have satellite phones. They can use internet. They sometimes are on the regime's 3G mobile net as well, as far as I can see. But I'm spotting Johan von Schreeb in the audience. He is a doctor for Médecins Sans Frontières. I'm curious, Johan, to hear about your reaction to the film, and also maybe a little bit on what they actually do need in the siege to take care of the wounded people. You've been in many wounded areas. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very interesting movie, and also very close to reality. I mean, I have limited experience, but still, and these scenes, especially with the war surgery going on, have been in similar situations in Afghanistan and other places. But you were talking here about whether he was, that he is not gone crazy, but has he not gone crazy? I'm thinking about Joseph Conrad, Heart of Darkness, and he has his group around him that supports him. And is he not crazy? Is he sane? And I mean, is it? I mean, how far do you go, and where do you stop? And is there a, can you ever end the conflict where people are not ready to, say, okay, let's, and this, persistency to continue fighting, where does it lead to? And here's what's the definition of being sane, and what's the definition of being insane? But my sort of reflection goes to, and I've met so many people with Masood in Afghanistan or Ismail Khan as well there, but these people who continue the fighting and without any sign of giving up, which of course makes everybody else follow them. But is it sane, and where is the limit for insanity in this sense?
What is the alternative?
I think what I usually refer to is Lord of the Flies rather than Heart of Darkness, because I think these boys are stuck on an island, and it's a micro-social experiment that they are being subjected to that does result in extreme insanity, if one may say. And I imagine myself there, and then it is that I start judging. Maybe, the parameter becomes me imagining how crazy I would have become if I was there, and then I look at them and think that I'm incapable of being that sane under the conditions. The example I gave during Geneva 2, we're talking early February, after a long time under siege, when someone like Bassett, who is like the energetic fighter, is still respectful and defending in an active way, not in a passive way, defending negotiation. That is my understanding of sanity under the conditions. So when I see him angry in a video he uploads on YouTube, I think that's good, because he's bursting out something. I don't know, it's also about products. Like, I have many friends in the siege. I know some of them are very difficult for me to communicate with now. And I just wrote about that yesterday, actually. It's when you start as an outsider to the siege, when you start feeling the person is going crazy in that Robinson Crusoe kind of loneliness on that island, gradually you stop communicating with them and you start training yourself that they are dead, not that they will die. Start thinking they will probably die, then gradually start thinking they will die, and then they become dead, although they didn't die yet. And when they die, it becomes a banal piece of news, no matter how dear they are to you. So I think, this is my side of insanity, while observing their insanity. Others are, like, for example, I told Axel on lunch today a story about a wonderful woman under siege, a very good friend of mine, and the character in the next film we were released, where she wrote this yesterday. She uses 3G phone connection when she can get close to the enemy lines, because enemy lines are covered by the mobile networks. So she calls the GSM provider company. So she is like, your call will be recorded for quality control reasons. She says, hello. The woman says, hi, I am Sumaya from MTN. What can I do for you? So the woman says to her, you can do something, which is, could you please stop my subscription with the Economist text message news service, because I really don't want this service and I didn't subscribe to it. So Sumaya, the GSM woman, says, okay, can you tell me why you want to stop the service? So the woman says, because I am under siege in Homs and I'm really hungry and I keep receive updates on the prices of chicken. So the woman stays silent for a minute and then she says, that's done, ma'am. Thank you for calling.
It's a great story.
And then I think she's not crazy yet. It's because this, writing this and doing this and then deciding to write it and writing it in this order leads me to thinking that she still have a robust, processor and also creative way of expressing. It's very difficult to judge. You just have to, I don't know, find a way to try and touch or look for pieces of sanity still in people. I don't know how to answer that. But in principle, how do this end never end? I totally disagree with you. I think that all of the human history was based on such wars being ended and being started also. I think that pacifism is not our new god. It's not our totem. We should not worship pacifism. It's not a good god anyway. It's not for its own sake, something we should just pursue. When I saw the first friend of mine who decided to fight, it was simply like this, talking of sanity and insanity and being in the forefront and avant-garde or so on. It was a guy whose friend was killed in a peaceful demonstration. Next day, in the funeral of his brother was killed in a peaceful demonstration. This is July 2011. And next day, he was in the funeral of his brother, holding his mother, and the mother was sobbing, crying over her dead son, when a sniper's bullet came in the head of the mother, and she just fell down dead next to him. And then he said, I'm fighting. So when I tried to tell him, when I stood in front of him and wanted to start lecturing him the usual, new millennium rhetoric of how great peace is, I felt so lame and stupid, and I simply could not. I never encouraged him, but I could not lecture him about tolerance.
Yes, thank you, Orwa. Very engaged answer. We have about 5 minutes more for a couple of more questions, and then we have to wrap up. Maybe we should talk a little bit about the future too. Question in the back first.
Thank you so much for this film, and I think that what we have seen is you have been able to capture the essence of what happened in Syria at the beginning, and I think you probably captured that the revolutionaries faced many dilemmas, that there wasn't a foreign plot from the beginning, but this was a revolution that developed. Also, when we talk about extremists, I think that this film, when it comes to the essence of what is happening in Syria, is that we shouldn't shift focus from the regime. I mean, when the extremists are within the regime, it's very easy to talk about, Salafist or extremists, but if you gas your own people, that's where you have the extremists. The question is, these fighters that we see, they will definitely not give up, and the regime will definitely not give up. So where do you think, how does it end?
I think we might want to have one more question before here in the front. Run. No, you have to run.
It's just a comment on the previous question about sanity and insanity, and I think after watching this film, I think what's so strong about it is that I think I started to feel insane in terms of like that we are actually all just watching this, and I think people who are fighting for their freedom are probably much more sane than Swedes just watching a country and people who are fighting for their freedom. So in terms of who defines sanity and insanity in this situation.
Well, I hope you don't just watch. You might want to do something, which is sort of the wrap up here. I know that Orwa, you might not think so, but Orwa actually is quite optimistic about his home country. So Orwa, a little bit on your thoughts about the future, and maybe going back to Tove's initial question, what can we do?
I think that all ways of prediction or foreseeing what will happen in the future only reflect the beholder, only reflect the people who start telling them or publishing or selling them. So it's very easy to look in Syria now and find reasons for optimism, as much as it is also very easy to find reasons for pessimism. Someone would start selling it is at least 10 years and it will be much more blood and there's no end visible for this, and hence let's just not do much because it won't work anyway. Others would be saying what I would definitely say, that I believe it's all of us in one world, and every one of us can do something that would contribute to a solution. Now, the question of what ultimately we would want to do is always hitting the wall of military intervention. The question of military intervention from the West, NATO, the USA, or so on. No matter whether the West wants to do it or not, we're talking about what we want. And I think it's, again, only another way of not doing anything. It's just raising the cloud, raising the stakes. So it becomes we either almost do nothing or we go on a full-scale militarized intervention, as if there aren't no steps, no possible grays in between. And I think focusing on the humanitarian access point is the solution for today. There's a bullying regime that is not allowing, that is feeling triumphant already and feeling it has the right to deprive people of food, medical support supplies, and media and access to communication. And that is a bully. The world should stand up and say to the bully, you can't, you are not allowed. But then, as long as the world says to the bully, you can't, it's not so nice what you're doing, the bully will not do anything. And I think this is a kind of teenage insanity question that we ask ourselves what to do with the bully. Can you convince or talk the bully out of bullying you? Or you have some point to stand up and tell the bully, I'm going to really, beat you up if you don't stop. So I think this is what's not happening. The other point that makes us always shocked, frankly, is the fact that I think this is the biggest ongoing massacre in contemporary history, where there is not a single international demonstration supporting or announcing solidarity. If I might be wrong, and if I was wrong, then it will be a marginal example. I am sure of that. It's only Syrians around the world demonstrating for the rights of the Syrians or for objecting the killing of Syrians in Syria. When Obama said we might be doing a militarized intervention, That's when we saw the West, really the people move, express themselves, go in small demonstrations, which is totally understandable. If I was a citizen of USA or UK or so on, I might have done the same. But we didn't see that in solidarity with people being massacred. So that's a big question. We ask ourselves all the time, why did the chemical weapons massacre happen last August 21st? 1,600 civilians were killed, sleeping or not, you know, with chemical weapons, and we didn't see a single demonstration of even 50 people in any world capital, or not capital, I don't know. So that's where we start asking ourselves, where is the problem? Is it really all of this very luxurious fatigue of solidarity? Because it gets to become a fatigue of war, a fatigue of bad news, a fatigue of news. But is it a fatigue of solidarity also? So it is a question, and we need an answer from the world. We need to discuss this. We need to see how can we help each other, because it's not far. It is not. It's, you know, the repercussions of what happened in Afghanistan, we witnessed in Iraq and now witnessing in Syria. And that's the 80s, and this is a long distance. You know, we never knew Afghanistan. Some Americans would consider us one region because all they see is the religion, you know, because they are sectarian. We don't know what's Afghanistan, basically, you know. And now it's impacting what happened in the 80s in Afghanistan is changing our contemporary history. The repercussions of what's happening in Syria are sooner or later going to be here anywhere. And we need to see this. We need to work on this together.
Thank you very much, Orwa. Big hand.